Greetings, men of 222. It's great to be with you today. Oh, we're going to do another one today that just kicks my tail because today's topic is effective listener. You know, this whole sub-acrostic under service has just done me in. Joyful heart, others first, spirit and self-control, right? And today we're going to talk about effective listener. In talking with Sherilyn yesterday, I asked her what the most critical part of listening was to her, and her reply was simple. She said she needed to know that she had the other person's attention. In other words, was I really paying attention to her? Was I actively listening to her? Isn't it interesting that an anagram, which means mess the letters up and spell it differently, the word listen can also then be moved to become the word silent. And while the tendency is to think that if I'm silent, that I'm a good listener, that's not necessarily the case, because I may be silent, but inside my mind, I'm thinking of all kinds of things, and I'm not paying any attention at all to the person that's talking. Oh yes, that's right, could be me. Well, in fact, I've been known to watch TV while listening. I've been known to read the internet while listening, and worse yet, I've been reading my phone while listening. That none of you do that, do you? I sure hope you don't. In fact, if you call me and you really think you don't have my attention, you're probably talking to me on the phone and I'm reading the internet or reading something on the phone, and you need to call me out on that. Each time I write a video script, I ask Sherilyn to read it for content and errors to give you guys the best effort that I can. And after reading this script, she said this. She said, "At times, I think you make yourself too much a bad example. But this time your criticism is well-founded." Oh, guys. I know that men in general have a hard time being effective listeners, but I know that for me personally, my wife puts up with a lot. You know, one of the ways to look at this, though, to really ground yourself and to really pull yourself back in, is to realize that one of the sincerest forms of respect is actually listening to what another person has to say, according to Bryant McGill. It is respect to listen to the other person in a meaningful way. To most people, listening is the time in which you don't speak so that you can prepare your reply. So if you're talking to me, that silence that's going on is not necessarily me listening to you. I'm already beginning to prepare my reply to you. Effective listening, though, is actually active listening. And Roy Bennett, in his book called The Light in the Heart, explains listening this way. He says, listen with curiosity. Great start, isn't it? Listen with curiosity. Speak with honesty. Act with integrity. The greatest problem with communication is we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. When we listen with curiosity, we don't listen with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. And that's really the key, isn't it? To listen to the person's heart, to really understand where they're coming from. In Proverbs 1, verse 5, it says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. And you can't hear if you're running off at the mouth. I guess it was an insecurity thing with me, but when I was listening to people before and we were in groups, oftentimes I felt like I had to fill the silence. I felt like I had to speak up or my point would never be given. And yet good listeners are people who sit there and oftentimes their perspective will be put forth by someone else in a group setting. Proverbs 12 and 15 says this, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. listens, not talks. You know, sometimes guys come and talk to me and they want counsel, but then they want to spend the whole time talking to me. Well, if you really want counsel, you've got to be willing to listen. Proverbs 31:1 says, a wise son accepts his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. A scoffer does not listen to rebuke. You can't learn that way. Now, one of the best things that I learned or read in preparing for this video today is from the great theologian Larry King. That's right, the interviewer Larry King. And he said this, I remind myself, listen to this, I remind myself every morning, nothing I say this day will teach me anything. So if I'm going to learn, I must do it by listening. Those are great words, are they not? I remind myself every morning, nothing I say this day will teach me anyway. So if I'm going to learn, I must do it by listening. I love this word picture that the author Laini Taylor said. She said, he listened like a cactus drinks the rain. Can you picture that? 100 degrees in Arizona in the summer, and you get one of those flash storms, and how a cactus must just devour that rain, right? So listening like a cactus drinks the rain is a great word picture of how we ought to pay attention to folks. In studying for this teaching, it is clear, one thing is absolutely clear. Leadership demands great listening ability. That's what leaders do. They actually spend more time listening than they do teaching or giving opinions. Have you ever considered that those who work for you are closer to the problems and may have great insights to big problems? It is interesting, on my coaching staff, I love to have guys give me input, partly for that very reason. Now, one of the problems is it's real messy. It's kind of like making sausage. You get this input and this input. Boy, it gets really uncomfortable. But eventually, you get to the finished product, and it's always better because you've involved the intelligence and the minds of all the people in your meeting room. As for me, I think it's important to acknowledge and value people that work with you. You must allow your staff to express their ideas. And if they do, whatever you do, you can't belittle them. Even if you think it is the dumbest idea in the world, you can't belittle them. Now, it's not to say that you can't say, I don't think I'm going to use that idea, but you don't do it in a way that belittles them, because if you belittle them, they may not speak up again because they don't want to take a chance on being put down. Sometimes that's painful, as their ideas are not as precise as they need to be. Notice I didn't say bad. I said they're just not as precise, and they kind of ramble and all that sort of thing. Nevertheless, the way that you get good information is to let people speak. They never will be better. That is, your employees, the people who work with you, will never be better if you don't value their opinion, let them speak, and allow them to improve. There's just no other way to improve. Your wives and your children, by the way, deserve the same kindness, do they not? As I was preparing today, I was thinking about how much I would love to get time back with my parents and my grandparents, to listen to their stories, to learn more about their life. You know, my dad was born in Floyd Switch, Kentucky, which is now non-existent because it was just a switching station for the railroad. I would love to talk to my grandfather about that. I would love to understand from my grandmother what it was like to run a country store at a place that all that happened was the train switched there. But at the time, I was too involved in what was important to me, and it wasn't that. I'd love to get that time back. An effective listener listens with curiosity. They listen with their eyes, and they listen with an expectation to learn. An expectation to learn. An effective listener asks questions, but then here's the key, and listens to the whole response. I can't tell you how many times I see people ask questions and then cut the person off who is answering the question. Let them answer. You ask the question. If you really want to know, let them answer. You say, well, they're taking too long. Well, okay. But you know what? They may say something in the last part of that response that's really critically important. My dad taught me a technique for listening when people are fighting, perhaps your kids. And what he did was he said, basically the concept is to repeat what the other person said before you're allowed to answer or return. So if you say to me, you know, the way I see this, you da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I have to repeat what you said, I may learn in repeating what you said. I may, for the first time, hear what your real gripe is. That's a really effective tool. As a coach, by the way, I should have used the technique that I learned from Marty Dwyer many years ago. She called it "Give me 5." And in addressing her students, when they weren't listening, she said, "Give me 5," which meant 2 open ears, hearing, 2 open eyes, seeing, and a closed mouth, not talking. We would call this the ready position for learning. Give me 5. Getting someone to listen starts with getting their attention, and kids understand the concept of "give me 5" as a hand slap, right? So putting your hand up with 5 open fingers may be able to help you get your students' attention or your children. It becomes code, you know, it's "give me 5, give me 5." Open ears, open eyes, closed mouth. When Sherilyn comes to speak with me nowadays, I've tried to learn, and I turn the TV off. It's the only way. One of the worst places to go to lunch with me is Buffalo Wild Wings, because my eyes drift to the TVs. Don't do that. Don't go there with me. Being an effective listener starts, though, with the way this whole thing on service does. It starts with caring about the other person's thoughts and feelings. It continues the concept of others first, spirit controlled. Proverbs 15:31 through 32 says, "He who listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. He who neglects discipline despises himself, but he who listens to reproof requires understanding." The Bible is very clear that listening and hearing is critical to the process of learning and growing. In Royce Bennett's book that I was telling you about, he gives us a guide for making others feel important. I wish as a young person, 2 things. I wish I'd have known this, and I wish I'd have put it into action. Not to manipulate people, but to really, it would have changed the way, it would have changed my dating life for one thing. Now, Lord willing, I'd have still ended up with Sherilyn, but it certainly would have changed the way that I talk to people. And he says this, number 1, use their name. A name is very important to people. That's what my grandfather taught me. 2, express sincere gratitude when speaking with someone when you have it. Number 3, and here we go, do more listening than talking. Do more listening than talking. Number 4, talk more about them than about you. Oh, wow. 3 and 4 I just didn't do. 5, be authentically interested in what they're saying. 6, be sincere in your praise. And 7, show you care. Those 7 things would really help your children understand how to become friends with other folks. I wish I had listened more and spoken less in my lifetime. I wish I had listened with my ears and my eyes and my spirit. I wish I had turned off devices and focused on people who cared enough to talk to me. I will do better starting today. Coach Hassey says you can start one day, or today can be day 1. So for me, today is day 1, not one day. So 5 takeaways this week. To most people, listening is the time in which you don't speak so you can prepare a reply. That's a problem. Number 2, listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, act with integrity. The greatest problem with communication is that we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. And when we listen with curiosity, we don't listen to the intent with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. Number 3, I remind myself every morning, nothing I say this day will teach me anything. So if I'm going to learn, I must do it by listening. And begin to use the Give Me 5 technique. Listen with your ears, your eyes, and your silent mouth. And then my question ends up being this: is today your day one, or will you start one day? See you next Saturday, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise. Be intentional this week while you honor Jesus.